Welcome everyone to this webinar session today on fundraising research or prospect research. Hopefully, it will provide you with some assistance and guidance on your quest of suitable donors. My name is Lena Arnold Fritsch. I'm a development support manager at Cymru Africa. And I'm grateful to be joined by Jaymie Duke. She's a charity fundraising expert and founder of a fundraising consultancy. And thanks very much for joining us all the way from Spain to share some of your wisdom with us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really good. That this is possible. And before I hand over to you, I will go through some brief housekeeping points. So if you can click on the next slide, then we can just.
Is that not moving? Sorry.
No problem.
Oops.
Okay, great. So as usually, the session is being recorded and will be published later on our website and on our YouTube channel. You are invited to let us know who you are. You can put your names and organizations in the chat, which you can also use for questions. We will keep an eye on that, and then these can be addressed later after the presentation. We do ask you to mute yourself, please, during the session. That would be really helpful to avoid any disturbance, and there's quite a few of us today, so that would be great. And lastly, just a safeguarding note. Obviously, hopefully fundraising is not too sensitive of a topic, but still to say that please do treat each other with respect. We do not tolerate any form of abuse. We encourage challenging and constructive conversation, but people's lived experiences are not up for debate. And if you breach this rule, you will be removed, and we will discuss the issues with you afterwards. If you do have any concerns and would like to make a complaint after the event, please contact Claire O'Shea at hubcymruafrica.wales. Okay, I think that's already it from my side. So over to you, Jaymie.
Thank you. Just double checking everyone can hear me, at least, if not see me. Yeah, Julian's saying yes, thank you.
I think so.
Thank you, Sue. I can only see a few of your faces, but I'll keep scrolling through here and there to see what's happening. So just really quickly to say, yeah, it's really lovely to be here. Thanks for having me. I have been working in international development fundraising for about 15 years. And so my focus is on raising funding from trusts, foundations, and institutions for predominantly those that are registered in the UK and work overseas, but also those that are directly based in and registered in Africa, let's say, or South America or Asia, very broadly speaking. And one of the things that I do for the charities I support is research potential donors for them, which is obviously what we're here to do today. And I've split the session into two parts. So there's going to be a pre-research stage. It's going to be really quick. I just want to make sure we're on the right page before we start diving into the different resources that are available. And then the research stage. So I'm going to talk about free resources. I'm going to talk about paid for things, and I'm going to just touch on a few other ways that we can look for funding. And then hopefully, if I don't either talk too slowly or too fast, there'll be a good amount of time for questions at the end. So let's get going. Where do we start? We've got a blank page, and we want to start understanding who might be able to fund our work in terms of trusts and foundations. There is a donor directory that I found really recently, just before Christmas, from a great foundation called Siegel Family Foundation. And they have a quote on their website that says, fundraising always begins with knowing who the funders are. And I'm saying that I disagree. I'm going to tell you why. And I think this is where I really would like to start. So I think that when we're going to be fundraising, or we want to fundraise from trusts and foundations, we actually need to do a little bit of prep work to know what it is we need funding for, what that thing costs, where we're having an impact, what our reason of existing, let's say, and to know if we're grant ready. And I'm just going to quickly talk through those 4 pieces. And actually, if you were at the Hub's session last month in December on an introduction to grant fundraising, you may well have gone through these. This is going to be the short piece just before we dive into all the resources. So we need to know what it is that we're fundraising for. Are we fundraising for a standalone project? Are we fundraising for our core work? And we need to know a rough idea of what that costs, including the staff costs, our overhead costs, all the project costs. We also need to know, and this is a really important point, where we sit in terms of our impact. So are we a WASH organisation, an education, a livelihoods organisation? And here I'd really love to kind of challenge you to think as laterally and as wide as possible, so that we can add as many different types of donors and trusts and foundations to our list as possible. And the last point is to know if you're grant ready. I'm going to go through these points in a little bit more detail in the next slide. But the last point really is more about, are you registered? Whether that's in the UK or in the country that you work in. And if it's in the UK, are you registered with the Charity Commission? Do you have 1 to 2 to 3 years of annual accounts? These sorts of things are things that many UK-based trusts ask for you to be eligible to apply for a grant. So it's something to keep in mind whilst researching these donors, to know that there are certain elements that you have to meet to be able to go ahead and apply for these donors. Another thing might be having a safeguarding policy or various other policies. So some things to keep in mind. It's a little small perhaps, but is a 6-question questionnaire that I give to charities that I support to help them start thinking about what it is they're looking for funding for, so that if I'm then helping them to do this research, I know I have as much detail as possible about who they are and what they do and what they want to fund, so that I can then most effectively find donors that meet those requirements. And I appreciate you might be reading this and thinking, gosh, 360,000 euros is an awful lot of money. This is far bigger than we're thinking, which is fine. I just used a real a screenshot of somebody that I've just recently worked with, and so I, to be honest, should have taken that out. But I work with organisations that are very small and then very big as well. And this specific organisation was actually looking for grants at around the €10,000 level to match fund a donor that was already agreeing to support them. I'm showing you this specifically because the first question, which activities and sectors do you work in or impact on, is something I'd really love for you to think about. I'm sure you're aware of these areas anyway, but for you to think as broadly as possible. If I just quickly move to the next slide. This organisation, so the infographic you can see here, is a female empowerment organisation that then thought as laterally as possible about the work they do to see what other pillars of impact that they then are having an impact on. And they wrote content and found they wrote content on each of those pillars for them to then be able to consider applying to donors that weren't just focused on gender equality, but they were also potentially focused on mental health, youth development, these other areas. And I say that because we want to know about as many donors as we can, and we want to see that we can apply to as many donors as we can without the big caveat of moving so far away from your core reason for existing, your theory of change, just to say, oh, I think we might be able to apply to this donor. The most simple example of this is people say a lot is if you're a water and sanitation organisation and that's your main focus area, that you should also then be considering education donors or health donors, because your work has a direct and proven impact on health and education for children, for example. So it's just to widen the search when we start researching. And then the last point about this pre-research stage is an ideal scenario would be that you are at this kind of point. So you have a statement that you can see on the left showing you what it is that you're seeking funding for. And I won't read it out, but there's a specific project there in a specific location and the reason that they want to do that project. And then the costs, the top line costs are associated with that project. It's not always possible to know total details at the very beginning, but I think it's very important to have a broad handle on these things before we then start diving into the databases and the resources that are available when we want to look for funders. So that's where I'd ideally like to be before I would then look for funding for an organisation. So let's do it. Let's see what's available. This first slide is very much focused on UK registered organisations that work overseas in Africa, or wherever, but overseas. And I appreciate lots of people on the call this may not speak to them, but I have another slide about organisations based directly in Africa, for example. And so the place I would start is similar charities. So you know what you do, you know what you want to do, and you may know of organisations that do very similar things to you. Maybe they work in a different country, a different region, or the same country in a different area, but they're impacting on or doing similar projects. And if you're in the UK, if you're registered in the UK, one useful thing to do is then use the Charity Commission's website or Google an organisation that you're aware of that's similar to you to look at who funds them. And I often call this a competitors review, but it's essentially just anyone that you think is similar to you to see who's funding them. If they're funding that organisation, then they may well be interested, that donor may well be interested in funding yourself. I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment. And then these other two options. So the Charity Commission, I wonder, I can't see all of you, but I think a lot of you haven't got your video on either. I was going to ask you who is comfortable or used to using the Charity Commission website for either looking at similar charities accounts, to look at potential donors, or to research donors directly. Someone's put their hand up, wonderful. If there's one takeaway from today for a UK registered organisation, I would say it's getting super comfortable with the Charity Commission's website as a resource for finding trusts that might be able to fund your work. I've said there that there's 49,000 possibilities. So there's a very interesting advanced search function on this website where you can see a list of trusts whose main purpose is to grant funding to other organisations. And when I looked recently, it said there were 49,000 of them. But obviously, we then need to find the ones that are funding overseas. And the last point is the Charity Excellence Framework. Anybody use that? Aware of it? Like it? Don't like it? Don't know of it? That's a lot of questions. I can see some people shaking their heads. Another really great free resource for getting that first initial list of names of firms that might be able to fund your work. So let's just go into it. Similar charities. So I use the Charity Commission's website to look at trust and foundations annual accounts and other NGOs, charities, annual accounts to see who's funding within a particular sector. And this is a screenshot of a charity that's registered in the UK that works overseas and is a £60,000 turnover charity. And these are the list of the donors that they say are funding them. And so what would I then do if this is really aligned, if this charity is really aligned to my organisation? I would then want to look at the John Pittman Charitable Trust, for example, and the Park Family Trust, and see whether they have information about receiving applications, what it is they're interested in funding. I would even say that you may want to contact the charity whose accounts those are linked to, and see if they're interested in talking to you about those trusts. Because whilst I call it a competitors review, it's actually a lot of the time these trusts can only give for 12 months or 24 months, and then you have to have a break between your grant income from that trust. So it's not always the case that people want to close their door and not talk to you about their donors. So often seeing people, other organisations, other charities acting as door openers or ways in, connectors to funders that fund them. So that's a smaller organisation. I've also included here another example of a charity who lists their trust funders on their website. A slightly bigger, a lot bigger charity. This is a £1 million turnover. I've included them here because I like the fact that you can see a year-on-year view. So if you look on the right, you can see that in 2022, for a lot of the trusts, they received funding twice over 2 years. And this is great because that tells you that those trusts can potentially fund multi-year, which is obviously wonderful. I've also included them because they talk about the Guernsey Overseas Aid Commission. They have an open call for applications currently for single year projects at about the £60,000 mark, which may or may not be of interest to some people on this call. You need to be a UK registered organisation to apply. So look at people that do similar things to you and talk to them and see what they say. They can only say no to talking to you. I also then wanted to talk about using the Charity Commission to find grant-making trusts. And as I mentioned there, the website suggests there's about 50,000 of them. This is an example of one called the Eleanor Rathbone Charitable Trust. It's a smaller size grant maker. They give away about £390,000 a year. The great thing about using the Charity Commission here is you get an insight into where that funding goes. So from this screenshot, whilst we don't need to read it all, if we just look at the table at the bottom, you can see that 78% of their funding stays in the UK for UK projects, but 18% goes overseas. And if we keep researching their annual report, we can also see the organisations they funded and the level to which they funded. This is important because the Eleanor Rathbone Trust has a website, a great website, and it gives you all the details that you would want to know about in terms of making a grant, how to apply, when to apply, the amount you can fund. But their website suggests that you can get potentially up to £5,000 in a grant, in a single grant. But their annual report actually tells me that they're probably only going to give you 1,000. And the other thing that it doesn't do, this particular annual report, doesn't tell me what they gave last year. So we don't know if any of those organisations have received multiple thousands, every 1,000 in subsequent years. But sometimes grant makers will do that. And one that I quite like is this blue box. This is the Souter Charitable Trust, Scottish-based funder that funds in the UK and overseas. What I like about them, I can't actually see it because of the way Zoom is set up, but you can see whether people have been funded over multiple years because they've got the last year's grant making list there as well. And just to say that here, it might be slightly misleading. You might be thinking, oh, I should apply to them at the £50,000 mark or the £20,000 mark because they're giving, I can see from their accounts that they're giving at that level. But again, on their website and on their accounts, if you really dig into them, it says that the majority, so 90% of their grant making is between £1,000 and £5,000, but unfortunately they don't list those out. They just have a chunk of money that represents 90% of their grant making that is under £5,000 grants. So that's the sort of level for an initial grant from that grant maker, from suitor. What's next, Steph? Okay, so I think here my point is that the Charity Commission has a wealth of information on grant making trusts, and if you get, they're dry, they're long, but if you use them and you don't have a website to start with, so the funder maybe doesn't have a website, this is a really great place to understand if they accept applications. Generally at the beginning of these accounts, you'll find out whether or not a trust will accept an application, the areas they work on. And what I generally do is I look at the intro to a trust's accounts, but to see that kind of information, and then I kind of forget the middle bit, and there's maybe like 15 pages that are not useful, and then towards the end is where you'll see these sorts of lists. It's like page 16, 17, 18, 19 at the bottom of a trust's accounts, where you'll see who they've given to and at what level. Not always, but oftentimes, and this is really useful information when we're researching. So the last example for a UK-based organisation, I would say, is the Charity Excellence Framework. It's a free resource. And in fact, it's probably useful for people that aren't registered in the UK, but it's built for UK registered organisations that work either in or beyond the UK. And it's great because it does a lot of the work for you. So you just put in the things you're interested in. So the region, country, the amount of funding you're looking to raise. And then when you fill out, you have to create an account. There's no paywall here. It's free, but you just have to create an account. And so you put in your categories, and then you get a list. And it looks something like this. And then you can click through to more full details and the links to the websites. So this database is a great starting point then for you to go off and do your digging on a trust or a foundation's website and or accounts. So those are my kind of like top 3 places to start for free resources. And then next, I've done this is going to move too fast, I think. Yeah, it's just going to happily just filter through all the different options. I'll try and bring it back to where we started. So if you're registered in Africa, a local organisation, these 5 points are the places I would start if you're looking for funding. Again, I've said similar charities very much in the same way. Look at your peers, who's doing similar work to you, and find out who's funding them. Essentially, online Google searching for websites, etc. And then the others are specific initiatives and databases that exist. So Justice Funds is amazing. They've been set up quite recently, and they put out information on just keeps moving, isn't it? On funding opportunities for locally registered organisations directly. And you can find these, I found them through LinkedIn. You can sign up to their, they send out an email every 2 weeks with a list of funding opportunities. Sorry, it just keeps jumping because I haven't organised my slides properly. The next one I've highlighted is Kuja Link. This was recommended to me by somebody who focuses on funding for local organisations in the global south. It's gone again. This platform is great. It's a connector for local. Sorry, I don't know how to stop this. It's just going to keep jumping through the picture. Kuja Link is a connecting system, so it connects locally based CSOs, charities with resources, including funding opportunities. Let's just go back. they're just about to relaunch next month in February. So I'd recommend, if that sounds appealing to anyone, to look them up, as they've slightly changed the way they work, but it's a free platform for locally led organisations. This is a part of their internal website. This next screenshot. And then the next resource is Civicus Donor Finder. So a couple of years ago, Civicus updated a PDF document with funders that can fund local organisations directly. So it's something that you can save as a PDF, you can print out, you can scribble on it. This is the kind of information you see. So this, who can apply, what's it for, the amount, the websites. It's a really great resource. There's a lot of information there specific to sub-Saharan Africa, but it's global. And then the last resource, this is the one I mentioned earlier. This is the one I found more recently from Siegel Family Foundation. They're very much into the localization effort. They're registered in the US, but all their staff are based in sub-Saharan Africa. And they've created this directory, which again is just a starting point for you then to do more of your own research. But you can fill in different criteria, and then they'll give you a list of donors that are funding organizations in Africa specifically, based on country and impact area. And this is just a screenshot of a few examples of the donors that they talk about. But again, there's lots on there. Okay, so those are my top 3 resources for locally registered organizations. The next stage that I thought would be good to look at is, if you've got less time and a little bit more budget, there are also paid for options. So this is going back to the UK registered organisations. These are the resources I use and I would recommend. So Directory of Social Changes, Trust Directory, they do one every year. And then Funds Online, which is a subset of the Directory of Social Change. And one that maybe is useful for everybody on the call would be GrantStation, which is based in the US but has funding opportunities for everywhere globally. So I'm just really quickly going to show you bits and pieces of all of these. So this is the blurb about DSC's directory. And this is an example of what you'd see if you bought this directory. It's paper-based. So if you're in the UK, you buy it. It's £135, and it would be sent to you for free after paying £135. There's no postal cost. The best tip I was given when I started working in a charity in the UK was to look in your local library to see whether they've got old versions in there that you can then take out for free. That lots of trusts, there's a lot of new trusts that register every year, but then a lot that don't change. So they'll be in there year in, year out. And so even if it's an out of date version, it's still a great starting point. And I love paper-based things. It's the only paper-based resource I've mentioned today. I just think it's great to scribble and highlight things rather than looking at a screen. So there's that. And then again, this is part of the same company, but there's something called Funds Online. Again, very much focused on the UK market, but has all the majority of trusts and foundations based in the UK that give to overseas development. And this is what it looks like on the inside. So you go through a process of entering all your different criteria, how much money you're looking for, where you work, lots of different ways to filter through the different options. And then on the right is an example of what you'd see if you click through on a specific funder. What I like about it is it tells you how to apply, it tells you whether there's a website, if it's not, it tells you how the trust accepts applications, and it's essentially a nicer, more nicely displayed version of the Charity Commission's annual report. So they've done the legwork for you. You don't have to trawl through the annual report or the accounts of a trust. It's slightly more, it's slightly easy. It's easier essentially to read. But I would still suggest that once you've found a trust that looks suitable, to do that legwork of going and finding their website, going and finding their annual accounts on the Charity Commission still. It just saves you the time of finding the name in the first place. What else do we have here? So this is the US platform. It's called Grant Station. I didn't tell you about the cost of this one, but you can buy this for a week, or you can buy it for a year. And the last time I checked, it was about £200 for a week and about £400 for a year, I think, something like that. And then Grant Station, very much the same thing. You put in your criteria into a search function, and it comes out with a list of funders that could potentially then fund your work. And this is shown on the right. And then this is when you click through to a funder that you might have found, it gives you more information there. This is a UK registered foundation, Waterloo Foundation, which is why I wanted to highlight it. It might be of interest to some of you. So this is a very expensive platform, but I've included it because there are lots of offers all the time, and I have access to this platform for $95 a year through an offer I found. But if you can't find the offer, then it's $699 for access, which for me seems like a lot of money. But if you were to get £10,000 grant from it, potentially that's a good return on investment. But like I said, I think you can get access to it for a lot cheaper. What is next? Okay, so potentially, hopefully I haven't overwhelmed you all with a lot of different websites, databases, ideas. I obviously do this a lot, week in and week out, and I realised during my work last year that I didn't know, there was nowhere collated where all these resources existed. And so I created a list, and it was partly because I was finding a lot of databases that sounded like they were going to be great for my work, but then realized they were actually focused on UK organizations providing service in the UK rather than overseas. So I created a list, and I'll share a link through the hub after the session for where you can access this list. There's about 25 different ideas on there, of which I've just mentioned about 6 or 7. And I've explained on this list whether or not somebody in the Global South and an organization registered directly in Africa could apply for, or whether it's Global North focused, but they're all specific to international development. And then you can't see the whole thing, but I've said like how much it costs, if it's free, what the paywall is, and what I think about it. So there's that. And then the last thing that I wanted to go through, I feel like I've gone through this far too fast, but LinkedIn is a great resource when you're looking for funding. It perhaps is most useful once you have that initial list of names that you're interested in. And what I would recommend is that you follow these foundations, trusts, donors on LinkedIn if they've got presence, or on any of their social media if they've got presence. And I'm highlighting them now because recently I've been seeing a lot of the staff at foundations actively calling for meetings with potential new grantees. via LinkedIn. And it's surprising because I don't often see that, but I've seen a few recently. So this lady is the CEO at a New Zealand-based foundation, and she was saying that she was open to hearing from potential new partners in Kenya. And then another one that I've left here. But I also use LinkedIn to follow funders so I can hear about calls for proposals. And I've just highlighted a few that I've seen in the last few weeks. So the Inner Foundation. This is the lady that shared about Global Affairs Canada. So at the start of the year, the Canadian government launched their local initiatives funding. So it's for locally registered organisations that work on all of those bullet points you can see there. And yeah, like I say, they always come out at the start of the year, so they're live at the moment for various different countries. Another funder that had one open recently, and this is a big funder, I appreciate, but I included this because I saw it 2 days ago. Grand Challenges Canada, and they've got a call out at the moment for it's called Play, Learn and Thrive. I'm including it because one of the things I wanted to leave you with was when there are opportunities that are open that seem too big for you, so or your organization is too small, it's sometimes really useful to think about who you might be able to partner with because you have a niche skill set, a niche set of expertise that then might be able to support a lead applicant apply to. I'm not saying specifically this donor, but any funding call. I've really whizzed through these slides, but I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to let that all sink in, and I'm very, very welcome to answer any questions that you might have. And I'm going to have a cup of tea whilst you think.
Wow, thanks very much, Jaymie. At this point,
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's always better to have more time than we need. Unless I don't think there are questions in the chat yet, but yeah, we're just waiting. Or you can also just unmute and speak up if you prefer.
I'll stop sharing.
Hiya.
Hi, Kat.
Hello. Oh, sorry, I've just seen Sue was taking herself off mute. I'll let her go first.
Did you say you want me to go first? I've just applied to the Big Give for match funding, but is it okay to still apply to other charities for funds at the same time for the same campaign?
I'm happy to, I don't know if anyone else wanted, Lena, you wanted to answer that. So the Big Give actually is a great way to introduce yourself to new trusts and foundations because you need, so I'm not an expert on the Big Give, but you need to have a sort of a matched funder, I believe, or they give you a champion funder for your project when you get accepted. And then you can take that offer. So you've been accepted to the Big Give. They've given you a champion funder. Let's just say it's the Reed Foundation, which is the foundation that runs the Big Give. You can then say to your prospective trusts and foundations, if you can match fund this gift, then your donation will be doubled. So yes, I think the quick answer is yes, you can still apply to other trusts and foundations for the Big Give. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that?
Thank you.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I will find out more and know more and be able to share more as we're planning a session on the Big Give Christmas challenge, specifically focused on that. But that will be a few months still. But yeah. Maybe just to say sorry at this point because we've been asked a few times that yes, we will share the slides after the session for those that haven't seen it in the chat. So yeah, don't worry. I think there's a couple more questions in the chat now. How about find fiscal sponsors that as way to mobilize funds for us in markets we're not. Do you know any?
Does that mean fiscal sponsor for the US potentially? Danny, I think that was a question from Danny. If you want to.
Yeah, I've lost out 2 opportunities in the US market where somebody told me that I needed to have a fiscal sponsor for the politics of grant making in the US. And I find one. I'm in Uganda actually,
Okay.
managing nonprofit. Yeah. So I was trying to explore if you know any information around fiscal sponsorship from markets like the US, because I'm not sure how they function, but he was trying to tell me that they kind of stand in for you and they take care of business for you on behalf of the other donor or something like that. I don't know.
So I essentially know as much as you, Danny. I know that fiscal sponsorship in the US is a means to access US funding if you don't have this thing called a 501c3, which is essentially just an NGO registration form in the US. But I don't know how. Do you know where would be good to look? It's called Candid, CANDID. They're an NGO resource platform in the US. And I do think they talk about how to access fiscal sponsorship. What I will say as a massive caveat to that is that the US market's difficult to access. And it's even more difficult at the moment because the government has just stopped all international aid for 90 days whilst they review it. And so it's an even more I'm going to say closed, I don't know what the word is, but it's a difficult market at the moment because the US organizations themselves are now struggling, and they will be looking at philanthropy, foundations, etc., to cover their gaps where they've lost government funding from the US. But anyway, I would suggest you look at this Candid. I'm not sure if it's Candid International, but it's Candid 100%. And I'll link to it when I talk to Lynn after the event. I'll share the link to that one as well.
Great, thanks. There's another question, but I also wanted to come back to Kath first because she was quicker. Sorry, Kath. Your turn.
You can see me freeze because I've forgotten what the question was.
Oh, sorry.
I think there was something around criteria and meeting criteria. So I guess that's quite time consuming when you're looking for donors and finding out whether or not you're a match for them, isn't it? And I wondered if you have any advice around criteria.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. So I wanted to really focus this session on the finding of the names of the trusts and foundations and where we look initially, imagining we had a blank page, but that is essentially the very, very next step about finding the synergy between your organization and the foundation that you just found. So it's a lot of digging, research, reading, and you might find oftentimes that a foundation sounds like a great match on paper, but then once you've done that digging, you're like, actually, I'm not eligible. And that can be really frustrating and demoralizing. What I would say is you need somewhere to, firstly, you need somewhere to store that information so you know not to go back to that donor, or to hold that information. It's really important. That can be an Excel, it can be a customer management system that you don't have to pay for. It can be very simple ways of doing it. And that's why potentially the resources like Charity Excellence Framework, the free resources that will give you that list of names so you don't have to do that step, and then you can start looking into them to see whether they're aligned to your organization, is a great place to start. But yes, there is a lot. You need to see whether you're eligible, whether they fund in your country, whether they fund you even if you're not registered in a certain country. Like there's so many different pieces of criteria that you will have to find out. I have an example of all the things I look for when I'm looking at a donor to make sure that an organization is eligible. Again, I can share the template of that so that you know the criteria that you need to look for. when you're researching. Was that helpful, Catherine?
Great.
I've just seen a question from Ivan. Len, are you happy that I do?
Yeah, absolutely. Go.
I just realized that I know you, Ivan. Hola, Ivan.
Hi, hola, ¿qué tal?
Hi, hola. Muy bien.
Perfecto.
We've met at a conference in Spain before.
Yeah,
Any concrete resources for Francophone Africa? Do you know, Annette, for that part?
yeah,
Such a good question. So,
yeah, because it's quite easy to find for funding. Well, not easy, but easy. You mean to find funding for British colonies, former British colonies, but not too easy. At least for me, to find funds for former French colonies. So I don't know if you have any concrete resource or something like that. I was wondering.
I don't have any concrete resource, but a super interesting question. And obviously, the thing that I've struggled with in terms of like continental, looking at, I'm going to say France, right? Because that's the starting point, is that I haven't found the equivalent of the Charity Commission in those countries. I haven't found it in Switzerland. I haven't found it in Spain. It's a harder starting point for sure. And my quick answer is no, but yeah, I can't think of anything other than like the French government at this point to say. But we'll chat. I'll think about it and we'll talk about it.
Thank you, Jaymie. A pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
I'm just reading through these questions as well, Lena. Yeah, just to say that Danny's question was about fiscal sponsorship, not physical presence in the US. Although actually, Danny, you just clarified that. Yeah.
Don't think there are any more questions at the moment. Yeah, use this opportunity. Or did you want to say something brief about AI, Jaymie?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I was going to include in the presentation was about artificial intelligence and whether or not that's a useful resource for if you are starting with a blank page. And I think the quick answer is yes. So I'm talking here about things like ChatGPT, but there are thousands of other ways to do it. And I actually did try it for this session to see what came out, and I wasn't super happy with what came out, so I didn't want to I wanted to focus on the things that I think are great. And it's fair to say that all these databases that I have suggested today are partly resourced via artificial intelligence. So it's not me or you sitting there and researching funders and uploading them and making it look pretty. Like it's all, like I'd say 50% of all the databases use AI to fill out the content. So why shouldn't we be using it was my thinking. And it's just about making sure, maybe that's where you need to start with Francophone Africa. Maybe we need to get ChatGPT involved.
Perfect.
We need to ask these systems the right questions to get the right answers. And I think I asked it. I'll add the slide. I made a slide for this session, but I deleted it because I didn't think it was valuable enough. But I'll add it back in so you guys can read it at your leisure. And it gave me a list of very, very big organizations, the real obvious ones, Comic Relief, Big Lottery, even like international ones, Gates and the like, that are not accessible, I would say, to the majority of people on this call, and anyone, especially like the Gates Foundation. And so I tried to hone in my questioning, and it did end up giving me a list of foundations that fund small UK organizations. And I think I even narrowed it down to Uganda specifically because I really wanted to see whether it was going to give me useful stuff. But what I'm struggling with artificial intelligence is that oftentimes they're only updated to a certain year, and it's definitely not 2025. So it might be updated to like 2021 or 2. And so it does oftentimes give outdated information. The links that you find then take you to a dead website, let's say. But maybe 10% of the information it gives you is useful. Maybe it's more than 10%. But anyway, I only just looked into this for this session. I'll add the slide back in. And my only caveat is that I'm super concerned about how bad it is for the environment to use artificial intelligence. And something like a 500 ml bottle of water per question or something. This is just me remembering poorly what I read on the news. But everyone's using it, so why shouldn't everyone know about it, right? Yes, lots of information, and I'm very happy for anyone to get in touch with me if you want to carry on talking about these things. What I do every day, I love it. So if more questions come up, please just let me know.
That's great. Well, yeah, no, I think already very useful. Thank you, Jaymie. Maybe it just gives me a lot of time to run my end poll to gather some feedback, which, yeah.
I'll ask a question.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go on.
So it was a bit quick, Jaymie, so sorry, but one of your slides was talking about you were like, oh, if you work on a WASH project, have a look at all these different areas so that you can like that seems like a really good exercise to kind of do for a lot of our projects. Do you have an example of anything that you've done? Is there
Yeah, so you mean in terms of thinking laterally about what you do and who?
Yeah, the graph had like
yeah.
different pillars.
So I work or have worked with very, I'd say, niche organizations that work in eye health. I think you also used to or did work or do work in eye health specifically. And so if you're only looking for funders that say on their website or their accounts, wherever that they fund eye health or hearing health or something very niche, then you're going to not get a very long list of names of people that can fund your work. And so one of the exercises that I've done with an organization is to then think more broadly about where they impact. And sorry, I just got distracted by the chats. And so with eye health and with WASH specifically, or any health related organization, you will be, and there's proof that certain health interventions then impact on a child's educational outcomes. And in the eye health world specifically, there's been research done that actually proves that link. And so if you can prove impact, or even within your organization or through a trial or research, whatever, then I think there's definitely a case to be made for applying to education focused donors that would definitely not mention WASH or hearing health or eye health or any other specific health intervention. And I've seen that work. I've seen, because it's a broad, so you just talk, so it's about positioning, it's about how you talk about your organization and why it's super helpful to have an organizational level, something like we call a case for support, which I'm sure lots of you will have heard of and have, that talks about your overarching work, but then have mini case for supports about other areas of impact. And I appreciate I did I went over that super fast. But yes, I'd say it works especially well for these niche organizations that work on a specific area. So yeah, WASH is the clear example where it sounds like you only want water and sanitation funders, but you can actually access educational funders or livelihoods funders or the like.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I think there's a couple more questions. Would you like to answer them, Jaymie, or read them even?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm just reading it. So the last one, Danny, EU. I can, so if it's to do with the European Commission, I mean, yes, it's a quick answer. I can definitely point you in the direction of other people that focus on specifics of different types of funders. Happy to talk about that sort of offline. And then again, this is a broader question. Joan, hopefully I'm saying your name right. I think I can't specifically answer that. It depends. I'd want to know more about your organization and specific challenges, and then try and point you in the right directions. And again, happy to talk after this another time about the specifics of your needs, I'd say. I think my contact details are on the slides, but anyway, we'll make sure they are, so you can follow up if you want to.
Yeah, I think that's great. Oh, there's another one. Is there any funding sources for universities research collaborating in Africa?
I don't know. Let's be honest. I don't know. University research collaborating in Africa. Gosh, again, yes, I'd say there are, but I don't know. That's the kind of thing that you want to then put into all these databases. So to see what would come out of, especially the free databases, if you can filter by research specifically, to get that list of names, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, I think I will run my poll now before we're actually running over in the end. Yeah, so hopefully you can see that. And I will leave it up for a minute. So yeah, give me some time and maybe use the time to cover the awkward silence that's always there, to remind you that you could always contact us, yeah, at Housekeeping Africa with any specific requests, any search for help. We are here to book a free one-to-one session, and I'm happy to help. So that's advice at Housekeeping Africa Wales. Yeah, and once again, just to reassure you, we'll be sharing all the slides and all the materials after the session, and more links and resources. Maybe another 30 seconds. I think that's fair. Okay, great. Okay, well, I think we're going to end it there. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks once again to Jaymie. Yeah, it's been really useful. Okay, all right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Likewise, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.